All right, here we are on Friday. We are Fantasy Football Universe. We haven't done this in a while. We do have a third contributor who I did a show with earlier in the week. He's not able to do the show today. I don't know if you could Skype record 3 people at once or not, but anyway, I'm Nick from CWE. He's BC Steele, and I gotta tell you, BC, like, I've been really hard on the NFL for like 5 years now. But if you watched, like, if you were a new fan and you started watching with the Super Bowl and your only exposure to the NFL was this year's Super Bowl and the draft last night, you'd have to think that the NFL is the greatest show on earth.
Absolutely. You definitely have to be a fan, just with everything that went on. And I was scouring Twitter to follow draft stories, and there were people that were kind of, I don't know if anybody's familiar, and it's a different sport, but there was a popular series of tweets a while ago from somebody that found their first NHL hockey game, and the guy was tweeting throughout the game and became a big fan just by watching one playoff game.
It was in last year's playoff, that's right, with the Blackhawks.
There wasn't anything like that, but there were people tweeting, never knew it was this exciting. The funniest tweet, and I should have retweeted it, and I'm going to try and search for it, but it put, what is a Mitchell Trubisky and why is everybody so upset?
Well, I mean, without question, that was definitely one of the most erratic things that took place in the draft. We'll get to that in a second. You know, it all started off with the Cleveland Browns. Adam Schefter, who in the process of the draft, I've basically lost every amount of respect that I had for him, because he, to me, like, he was almost just trying to be a Twitter whore. Like, he was just trying to put stories out there that had no, like, do you really think the Browns were considering Trubisky at 1? No, they were not considering Trubisky at 1. They weren't considering any quarterbacks anywhere. I mean, the idea that they were going to trade up from 12, this is a team that has traded back 2 consecutive years now. Why? The thought that they were going to trade up into the first round isn't even consistent with what they've been doing. And I know we expect the Browns to eventually get in their own way, but that whole thought process, it was really irritating. So, long story short, very glad to see him take Myles Garrett. My take on Myles Garrett is, don't believe he was the best player last year at the position. I do believe Derek Barnett was better, in my opinion. Solomon Thomas was good too. But I think of all the players in this draft, Myles Garrett has the highest ceiling, but not the highest floor.
I would say, just to kind of address what you just mentioned about Twitter whores, Ian Rappaport reported, he's not only the one I believe that reported of the Romo Cousins 49ers 3-way trade. I also believe he was the first one to report it. It was very, very, not too many people reporting that. Also reported last night that the Browns were trying to trade for Cousins. I got excited at the prospect of it, but I didn't think it was going to happen. I was willing to jump on that Browns bandwagon if it happened, but immediately shot down by pretty much every beat reporter in Washington, the Browns front office, and everybody. So I guess that happens this time of year. Somebody floats something to them and they run with it, hoping that they're ahead of the story, and turns out that there's no story at all. And for the record, this is not liquor. This is water with a flavor pack in it. So
I thought you were drinking piss.
Well, well, actually, I'm playing the role of Ryan Pace, GM for the Bears, and here's how I think it went down. If anybody's seen the movie Friday with Debo, and I forget the guy's name, but he has the gold chain, and Debo comes and takes the chain, and the guy goes, "Man, my grandmama got me that chain," and he runs off, and Smokey, Chris Tucker, goes, "Man, he gonna cry in the car." Well, John Lynch was Debo, Ryan Pace, GM for the Bears, was the guy who had the chain stolen, and all the other GMs were Smokey, because credit for the Bears, I guess, getting their guy, but did they really think 49ers were going to take a quarterback? Did they think somebody was going to trade up? They gave away. Here's what the 49ers did. They essentially said, we'll drop down one spot and get to pick the guy we want anyway. we're going to get a 3 this year and a 3 next year. I know they got the 4, but they ended up trading back into the first round to get Reuben Foster, who is a player that I saw on some boards had Reuben Foster going second overall to the 49ers early on. So I would say, at least at this point, for his first draft, John Lynch is winning. Winning.
There's no question about it. The Bears, and I alluded to it last night, come on, guys. Like, you overpaid for a backup in Mike Glennon, which was already bad enough. And you were one of the worst teams in coverage last year. You had basically no interceptions. And you take your draft stock and you say, we need to move up to one spot to get Mitch Trubisky because he's the answer. Let's talk about Mitch Trubisky. Like the kid, from Northeast Ohio, great story, was Mr. Ohio, went to UNC, played in a mix of 14 games in 2015 with Marquise Williams until they decided Marquise Williams was just a better player so that they were going to focus more on him. No, that's 2014. 2015 Marquise Williams played. He gets drafted or signed as a free agent by the Packers. Trubisky, and let's preface that, Williams in his last year takes North Carolina to the ACC championship game with Larry Fedora, and I believe Gene Chizik had just come on to coach the defense. Chizik is one of the better defensive minds in college football. Defense improves, yada, yada, yada. Williams leaves the school. Trubisky starts, and he starts 13 games, goes 8-5, takes a North Carolina team that did not lose anything meaningful on either side of the ball, cannot return them to the ACC championship. The ACC, not a strong conference as it is. Not a lot of other teams really lost anything either. That's where my question marks really come in with Trubisky. I think this is a situation where he spoke not even to the NFL like guys that grade talent or whatever, but I think he spoke to his agent, and his agent was like, look, next year Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Jake Browning all coming out. You could have some teams fall in love with JT Barrett depending on how he plays this year. You might be sitting in a situation next year where you've got 5 quarterbacks ahead of you, maybe 6, depending on how things go for some other guys. Best bet for you to come out this year. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what happens the rest of this draft. The Chicago Bears are the loser of this draft.
Well, they would have to really, really pull some amazing stuff. Another thing, you and I talked about this before, the Browns. Now, I'm going to grade this on the Browns front office scale, which means you have to take into account the things they've done, the players they've passed on, and some of the head-scratching moves that they've made, even including last year letting Alex Mack and Schwartz go. I believe it was Schwartz. Alex Mack, by far, was the biggest free agent loss and the biggest free agent gain of the offseason last year. So grading on that kind of scale, the Browns, to me, get an A+. Only, if nothing else, they picked good players, they got good value, and they didn't mess it up. Now, we're only 1 round into a 7-round draft, so that could greatly change. But can we say that we're looking at a turnaround? Maybe not right now, because they still obviously have quarterback issues. And the only thing I will say about Brock Osweiler, I know we've knocked him. Fantasy-wise, he hurt me because he made DeAndre Hopkins useless for some weeks. But the Bill O'Brien system is very, very complicated, which is why I don't think we're going to see a huge Deshaun Watson year this year. But Bill O'Brien's offense is very, very complicated. I don't know if the Cleveland offense is as complicated, but I don't think it's more complicated. So I'm not saying Brock Osweiler is going to be your MVP, but I'm saying at least he has something to go in. He's got good guys to throw the ball to. He's got an okay running game, and the offensive line was greatly improved this year. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Browns will not be picking in the top 5 next year. There, I said it.
So my multifaceted response to a number of your questions, well, comments here, really. I think the Browns will be picking in the top 5. Whether or not they've traded up for it or not is a different part of the discussion. The Browns can go 16-0 and still have enough draft capital to pick first in the draft next year. That's a scary thought. They will not go 16-0. That is not what I'm saying. My thoughts on the front office are kind of like this. think successful, be successful. So when I look at the moves that they made, you can see Belichick, the Green Bay front office, the Steelers front office, all make the kind of moves that were made by the Browns last night. Not necessarily the players, but just not jumping off a cliff. Like we've seen in the past, Cleveland was absolutely willing to jump off a cliff just to make stupid decisions. Trading up for Whedon, trading up for Johnny Manziel. Like that was my biggest fear when they traded from 33 to 29, is I was like, oh my god, they're going to wreck everything they've done thus far just to grab a mediocre quarterback. Are you honestly going to tell me that any of these guys that are on the board right now are that much better than Osweiler or Kessler or even Kevin Hogan? No, they're not. I mean, you're taking a risk. Why would the Browns just use one of their top draft picks, even today, to take a quarterback when realistically they're going to be taking a quarterback next year? I want to look at it like this. Here's what I think this team's doing. I think this team is loading itself up with playmakers, people that might not be like an immediate stud year one, but in year two, you can start to see some measurable growth. And then what they'll do last is they'll drop a quarterback in. You want to know why? Because quarterbacks cost a lot of money. So if you're able to build a team, right, on 3 and 5 year deals around a quarterback, and when all those deals start coming up for negotiation, you drop the quarterback in there when he's cheap, you have a lot of money to spend around him. So there's a lot of logic that goes in, I think, to what they're trying to do. I don't think that they're going to take a quarterback this year. I think it will be next year, and I think it will be early. But let's move on from the Browns. I mean, Solomon Thomas, I think, is a solid pick. Can we agree that Mitchell Trubisky has no fantasy value?
I would agree. I do think he's going to start at some point, but he
might start, but like a lot of quarterbacks start. Josh McCown started. Robert Griffin III started. Ryan Fitzpatrick started. None of those guys had any fantasy value in 2016. So I just don't see it being a situation. Next two guys up on the board, Leonard Fournette to the Jaguars, Corey Davis to the Tennessee Titans. Now we're definitely starting to talk about some guys who have some fantasy value in 2017.
Agreed. To me, Leonard Fournette, we're far off from our draft. Our draft for our Dynasty League starts in July, but there are people that do their rookie drafts the Saturday after the draft, or the Sunday, I should say, because Saturday it ends a little bit later. But they do their rookie drafts right away because that's when everything is most raw, and I guess it brings some excitement to it. So do you go with Fournette 1-1 overall? Because as much as I like Fournette, McCaffrey in that Panthers offense is kind of exciting.
I have a tough time really assessing what I would want to do right now. To be honest with you, my gut takes me two places with 1-1. One of them I wouldn't do just because I know I'd be able to get him later, but I do think Fournette would be one of my first picks. It's just, I don't know how much I love the situation he's going into, but I think the opportunity is going to be there. That's half the battle. My other 1-1 would be Patrick Mahomes. The reason why I wouldn't take him 1-1 is because not only do I not think he's going to need to be taken 1-1, but because he's still got another year or two of development. But in terms of quarterbacks in this draft class, to me, it was Patrick Mahomes first, and it wasn't even close after that. I think this kid, under the right tutelage, could be the best overall quarterback in the NFL.
High praise, very high praise.
I mean, he's got it. He can throw. He threw a football 80 yards at his pro day. I mean, if you watch his tape, he's able to scramble, and he played shortstop. His dad was a professional baseball player. He gave up baseball where he could have been a pretty high draft pick as well to play football. He can sidearm the ball like 50 miles an hour to like the tip of a knee. I mean, his pinpoint accuracy throwing in ways a quarterback should not be able to throw is absurd. And I think it's just a matter that too many of the talking heads on television. I mean, that's the worst part of the draft process. These guys have no idea what they're talking about. When they mock, it's just the ideal situation. I mean, I sent you my mock. I posted my mock. My mock was a completely untraditional mock. I had 3 quarterbacks going in the first 10. I wasn't right, but I had, there were 3 that went in the first 12, and it was the 3 I had going in the top 10. So I don't feel bad about that. I feel like that's how this draft was forming. This draft reminded me of the Ponder Locker draft, where it was a couple of good quarterbacks that were just going to get pushed way up because there's no one else there to kind of balance. Like, if Jake Browning were to have somehow come out this year, Jake Browning would have been taken at 1, and you might not have seen another quarterback taken until 16 because there would have been such a dynamic drop-off in potential between those two. So then you have to consider, like you said, now we've got, Jamal Adams. He's going to be a guy, if you do IDP, I'm going after Jamal Adams very heavily. He's going to be a true stud. How he fell to 6, I don't know. If the Browns were going to trade up, I did want them to trade up into one of these spots here where they could take like a guy that had fallen like Jamal Adams. Obviously wasn't in the plans. After him, though, you have Mike Williams to the Chargers. You have Christian McCaffrey to the Panthers. You have John Ross to the Bengals. You have Mahomes to the Chiefs. Then you have Watson at 12 to the Texans. That's a lot of offensive beef, especially considering, again, if you looked at most traditional mock drafts, like 1 through 15 was front-loaded with defensive talent, I felt like, and that is not at all how things played out on draft day.
Absolutely. I mean, the first 12 picks, we only had 4 defensive guys. So I made the joke to somebody as we were discussing the draft. They said, this is not a fantasy football draft. This is supposed to be a NFL draft, but it benefits guys that were looking to shore up defense. I mean, just continuing down on through as to avoid going through every single one. Jonathan Allen went 17 to the Redskins. If you're a Washington Redskins fan, you have to be thrilled with that. Adoree Jackson, 18 to the Titans. I saw him. He was a weird one in mock drafts. I kind of saw him all over the place. But yeah. He's an offensive guy, but just because of the way things fell, O.J. Howard, 19 to the Buccaneers. I mean, that's insane.
And this is jumping over Reddick at 13, and many thought he was going to end up in the top 10 the way his draft stock. Marshawn Lattimore at 11, he was the top 5. Barnett, who I truly believe is the best edge rusher in the draft, at 14. Hooker at 15, another top 5 guy. Marlon Humphrey kind of jumped up the board a little bit. Jonathan Allen, who again was a top 2 guy in some players' boards, and we kind of see this jump way up the board for a lot of these offensive guys, which forced a lot of the top tier talent defensive players down, into the mid-teens and early 20s. So you do see a situation where a lot of those teams that were kind of middling teams, I want to say, did get better because they just had so many guys fall to them in their laps. Like the Redskins at 17 probably had no situation that they were preparing for whatsoever that Jonathan Allen was falling to them.
Absolutely not. And the coverage that was discussed today said the Redskins could not believe that he was there. Literally, I hate when people use the word literally. Like, oh my God, I was literally dying. No, you weren't. Shut up. Anyway, that this is now the Ben Rants on Things podcast. But that they were literally shocked. They couldn't fathom that he was there. And the only thing I can describe, anybody that's done a fantasy football draft, when you see a guy and you see 2 people in front of you, and then that guy is still there when you pick and you're amazed that he fell and you can't write the name down fast enough or you can't say it fast enough or type it in or select it. That's how I figure Washington was, because they needed somebody along the defensive line. And I don't think Jonathan Allen, people could make an argument for Myles Garrett, Thomas, and Jonathan Allen as far as your top 3 defensive ends. And I saw some people have Allen second. And one draft I saw, or one rankings I should say, actually has Jonathan Allen as the top defensive end. So
yeah, I mean, he's an elite talent, and that Redskins team, I mean, it gets better. The Buccaneers, you got to think the Buccaneers start to look a little fierce. I know that this jumped a lot of people, or this rubbed a lot of people really oddly, because literally there were two names attached to the Buccaneers since the end of the college football season, and that was Christian McCaffrey before teams decided he was a top 10 quality player, and Dalvin Cook, who we did not hear called on day one. So, it was surprising, and it's funny how, like, you don't always hear the whole story about why things happen. I was shocked. I was pretty confident Dalvin Cook was going here. But then you have O.J. Howard coming in. You have the news from Tampa Bay that nobody's looked better in OTAs than Doug Martin. And we know Doug Martin is a talented football player. He dealt a lot with injuries, and apparently, obviously he's going to be suspended for the first, is it 3 or 4 games of the year?
4.
4. But now you're dealing with a situation where you've got a huge physical receiver with the second biggest catch radius in the NFL, and Mike Evans. First one belonging to a guy we'll talk about in a couple minutes here. You've got Deshaun Jackson to just take a defender down the field with him, and when Winston lets the ball go, I mean, he's a guy to take the ball, deep threat. And now you've got O.J. Howard, who is the most physically ready day one tight end in the league. And if Martin is able to do what it sounds like he's doing in OTAs, sure, you're going to be caught up for 4 games, but you've got Sims, you've got Jaquiz Rogers, who proved to be a serviceable back when there were issues going on there. From a fantasy perspective, it's hard to not look at this Tampa Bay team and not get excited, especially for Jameis Winston.
Yeah, I think by the time drafts come around, he's going to shoot up the boards. But if you're looking for, at this point, a guy a quarterback you can take late that could put up QB1 numbers like we saw Matt Ryan do last year, I think Jameis Winston is the guy. Just look at his offense, just look at his options, and I don't know from a schedule standpoint what he's looking at, but I'm willing to take Jameis Winston as my QB1 at this point.
Yeah, I did. I know that, like, usually it's, I guess it's not really much further than now, but Yahoo released their fantasy football leagues on Wednesday already. So I did a mock draft that night, and I don't remember where Winston was taken, but I was shocked to see where Cam Newton was taken. He was being taken in a 12-team league in like the 6th round. Not saying that's where he was taken, and I'm sure that could adjust some, but that's where that's where the Yahoo ranking algorithm had him at, which doesn't really have to do with anything. But again, now we have a guy here who has Kelvin Benjamin, Greg Olsen, Christian McCaffrey. You gotta think that I think that they're still one receiver away from having that, like, complete offense, and there's still plenty of great guys on the board right now that I think could be a great fit there. We'll have to see how that develops, but yeah. Broncos, Garrett Bowles at 20, Jared Davis to the Lions, Charles Harris to the Dolphins. Nothing, great picks for all those teams. Definitely the Dolphins, especially in a lot of mocks. Harris was a top 8 pick, so you're getting great value there. Then we have the Giants take Evan Ingram, and Ingram was a guy that I've followed him for quite a while now. Nice tight end, a little bit undersized, only 6'3", but he ran like a 4.42 at the combine, which you don't see a lot of 6'3" tight ends doing. So I think he does make for like an interesting matchup nightmare for just about anyone who's going to try to cover him. And the Giants have had to roll out like Larry Donnell, Will Tye, just guys that like have done better than expected, but still Eli with Brandon Marshall, Sterling Shepard, Odell Beckham Jr., and now Evan Ingram. That's another scary offense we're looking at.
It's going to be interesting to see the parallels of the second and third tight end taken, because I actually liked Njoku better than Ingram personally. I am not hashtag college knowledge, but I personally like Njoku a lot more, and he went 29 to the Browns as opposed to 23 to the Giants. I think the Giants could have waited for Ingram, but, if you want your guy, you take him. Another two interesting ones, actually three interesting ones that I think to be determined. Two, and they went all in a row. Garyon Conley, we all know the stories there. He did submit to a polygraph. He passed. He has adamantly denied the allegations. At 24, I don't mind that to the Raiders. I think
it's gonna be fine. I mean, you would assume that there is no way that this kid would be lying about this. Like, I know that sounds naive, but he's risking literally everything by not being forthcoming, and he's been nothing but forthcoming. So my only hope in this situation is that the female who did this gets prosecuted very heavily, because this is different. This is not you or I getting accused of it. This is someone who has literally lost millions because of a potential misrepresentation of facts. And I quite frankly, I get sick of hearing about stuff like this. If it's going to be an equal rights situation, it does go both ways. So I hope that she's brought up on charges yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And according to the polygraph, he was telling the truth. Obviously not admissible in court. There are witnesses that say that what this person is reporting did not happen, that Conley's account is accurate. And on top of that, he's meeting with police Monday, and I believe he's going to give a DNA sample as well. Following him, Jabril Peppers to the Browns, which they definitely need somebody to play center field. My worry there is, what position is he going to play? I mean, he did everything from wildcat quarterback, running back, return. He was on special teams. He cornerback, safety. I believe he also handled water boy duties and sold popcorn for a few of those games as well. And I'm swatting a gnat that's in my way now. Also following that at 26, Takaris McKinley. I love the story. I love the interview. I love the passion. And it makes me think, you know what, this guy is going to play. But do you think that the Falcons could have waited on him?
No, I don't think they could have. Let's go to Jabril Peppers first. And this is kind of like, because I can't remember the guy's name, but CBS Sports had someone doing on the spot analysis of all the draft picks, and he's the only person who I've seen give this pick an F, the Jabril Peppers to the Browns. And his response was literally what you said. What position does he play? So let me break this down for you. Here's the Cleveland Browns. There's 11 players on defense, right?
Yes. Unless they change it.
How many of those players on defense that the Browns have are average or above? It's not necessarily a thing where it has to be a numbered answer. The point I'm getting at is, how does it hurt to have a guy who can play every position? He's better than the guys they have. That's it. And they can slot him in at nickel. He's going to start as a nickel, as either a nickel corner or some one of the safety positions, playing closer to the line of scrimmage. They're going to have him return kicks and punts. They're going to have him play on the offensive side of the ball. I'm not jumping around and saying A+ pick, this is the best thing you could have done, but this is by no means the worst pick that someone could have made at this selection.
I'll tell you, I'll definitely give that a B, maybe a B+. The thing that's interesting too, and I mentioned this earlier on Twitter, I believe, or Facebook, or some social media, with Myles Garrett. Greg Williams is the defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. He's not going to accept the guy slacking off. He's good at dealing with safeties. He turned Mark Barron from safety to linebacker. He's dealt with some personalities, if you will. So Myles Garrett, I don't think, is going to be taking plays off. Jabril Peppers is going to be solid. I don't want to compare him to Troy Polamalu, but you mentioned about playing up on the line. I think you could see some of those packages and some of those plays for Jabril Peppers where, yeah, he may be the safety, but he's going to be, rushing the quarterback or maybe dropping into coverage or just doing what Jabril Peppers does. I know there are some character concerns and samples this and et cetera, which to me is an intelligence thing because either you're addicted to it and you need to get help, or you're just not smart because you know you're going to be tested.
Are you talking about Jabril Peppers, or are you talking about Takaris McKinley?
I thought Jabril Peppers had a.
No. I'm kidding because yes, I love the passion that McKinley showed, but it also showed me a guy who's clearly not intelligent enough to know when to bite his tongue, and he wears his emotion on his sleeve, and that stuff's all cute and stuff. But when you get in an NFL game and you wear your emotion on your sleeves, you take stupid penalties for your team. That's not a good sign for things. That's what I see when I see that. That's great. Love the F word. Was great to hear it dropped after the GD. Everybody leaves that out, but it was a pretty nice profanity-laced tirade. Did he find the biggest possible picture that he could take, short of getting like a canvas painting done of his grandmother? It was this. He's just carrying this huge thing around. And what is with people carrying things around on the draft? Great, you have a kid, he changed your life. You don't need to take him out to meet Roger Goodell. God forbid, when you're hoisting him up with one hand, that the baby falls. It's not going to look too good for you, all right? Just let's start exercising some common sense here.
My lovely girlfriend, one, she's upset because Lamp wasn't taken because she predicted him early to go 26, and I said, why? She goes, I don't know, because his name is Lamp. So that
sounds about right.
With this draft, you know what? That's actually not a bad strategy, but. She said, I like Garrett. She goes, I like that guy that as Garrett Bowles walked across the stage. And I go, yeah. She goes, has anybody ever brought out their son? And I said, no. She goes, what if he drops him? I said, well, then this is the greatest moment, as long as the baby's okay, the greatest moment in NFL draft history. Because I don't think anybody's ever fallen or tripped or anything like that. And you did throw me off when you mentioned Takaris McKinley and diluted samples. I was like, uh-oh, wait, I missed something.
No.
I agree that point of emotions. I think in that case, emotions understandable. But I will point, and I've referenced him a million times on the podcast, to Honey Badger.
Yeah.
With the Cardinals, and I know that's not his name, but Tyrann Mathieu. His interview showed passion. It showed that emotion. It showed everything, but he wasn't swearing. So time will tell with that. And as I wear my terrible towel, and I will say that Saturday, my future wife, Mandy Moore, and Milo, name I can't pronounce, playing Jess on Gilmore Girls, will be in Pittsburgh at the Steelers draft party.
Oh, boy.
Sadly, I have to stay 50 feet away from Mandy Moore at all times. Excuse me, 500 feet away. But the Steelers selecting T.J. Watt, I know Yinzer seemed to enjoy this pick. I don't really like it as much as everybody else. One-year wonder. Yeah, I know his brother's J.J. Watt, but that doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot. So, yeah, he might know what's needed of an NFL athlete, but let's be honest. I think there were better players, not only pass rushers, but positional cornerback and safety as well at that spot.
Part of me wonders if the Browns really did trade up to wreck the Steelers' plans. It's so tough to know because I think and I've always believed this, when you got guys that are like, I talked to an NFL GM, and he told me this, and I've always thought to myself, like, why would you believe what he's telling you? Why? Why would any NFL GM, what do they have to gain by telling Adam Schefter anything? Who is Adam Schefter? He's not anybody. He's someone that we've all been trained to, like, follow and be like, oh, he reports things about the NFL. But he's not Bill Gates. He's not the president of the United States. He's just some guy who has a Twitter that a lot of people follow. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. He gets paid probably a lot of money. If he keeps reporting false news, he's going to be the 101st person to go from ESPN. But anyway, you'll never really know what the front offices want. I'm thinking to myself, if I'm Ben and I'm looking at that offense, I've got Le'Veon Bell. I'm really excited about that. I've got Antonio Brown. I've got Martavis Bryant. But I've got David Johnson and Jesse James at tight end and, David Njoku. And this is the difference. This is why I make the defense of why the Giants should have gone with Ingram where they did. Evan Ingram is playing for Eli Manning. Eli Manning does not have a long NFL life left. So if the Giants want to win with Eli, which is the most likely scenario because it's highly unlikely another quarterback is just going to jump in there and be able to take them to the promised land. You're not seeing that happen too often. So they needed a tight end that was game ready. Now, David Njoku, we didn't really get a chance to talk about him. He is who I really thought the Steelers wanted. Big physical kid. I think playing with Ben would have been a lot easier for him to expedite the skill set that we all know about. But this kid literally has the largest catch radius in all of the NFL. I mean, it's incredible. I believe he was like a former high jumper or something like that. Athletic to a T. Little bit of a situation. I don't want to call it a situation, but like needs help making sure he's catching passes. But ceiling on tight ends, no ceiling higher than David Njoku in this. It's just a floor, you know. And I don't think the Browns are taking him and saying, okay, we're putting you on the field. You're our top guy as far as tight ends go. I think they're willing to say, all right, you're going to start off with special teams. We'll put some 2 tight end sets together with you and Gary Barnidge. We'll develop you. And when the time comes, obviously Barnidge isn't going to be around forever. And, I mean, it took him a really long time to figure out how to be a good pass-catching tight end. And he really wasn't that last year, to begin with. But Njoku's a guy I'm really high on. TJ Watt, when you told me that yesterday, I was just like, come on, guys. Like, you could have done better than that. And this is the general feeling now, I feel like 2 years in a row with the Steelers is like, you're like, I'm not like horribly disappointed, but I'm not exactly like jumping out of my seat either. You know,
it's not the worst move of the draft. I think
no, it's not, but it's not the best.
No, it's definitely not the best. I will say what could possibly be the best is Reuben Foster. 31. A guy that if you look a little bit before the combine, he was second overall to the 49. No lower than top 10. I did see a few where he slid down. If they factored in trades, a few teams traded up to get him. But, I mean, 31. John Lynch just hit a home run. No doubt about it. I mentioned it earlier at the top of the video here that he, in his first draft, was able to get 2 players that are probably going to be impact, I would say, fairly soon, maybe this year, and 2 guys that can be staples for a team that lost a whole heck of a lot the last couple of years. So kudos to Mr. Lynch, Debo.
So here's the thing. I think this pick has to have an asterisk next to it because it was reported at some point that 5 other teams passed on him because in medical follow-ups there was determined to be something more with that shoulder. So yeah, I mean, it's a great thing to say, hey, you know, we got this guy who should have been a number 2 pick at 31, but does it mean as much if he's never able to live up to the capabilities because of an issue with his shoulder? And shoulder issues are some of the most complicated issues you're going to deal with in the human body because of the range of motion. Like, think about what the arm does that the leg doesn't do. Like, it moves in all kinds of different directions. It's a bigger deal than people think. If you or I get shoulder surgery, it's going to impact our lives probably for good. Maybe it's not going to keep us from doing what we're doing for a living, but when you do say it's done to an athlete, there's definitely some bigger consideration to be given there. So, well, remains to be seen.
Going on talent alone, I love the pick. I do agree, and apparently there are some teams, and it's from USA Today. Teams believe Reuben Foster will require a second surgery to repair a torn rotator cuff. Here's the one issue, because I knew he had shoulder issues. I didn't know it was a rotator cuff. And here's the issue I'll say with rotator cuffs. If it's repaired repeatedly, it can wear away, and you completely have no range of motion in your shoulder. I'm not saying he's at that point. And normally you see that with like degenerative arthritis and things like that, where they take the socket out or they take the ball out. So you're not, your shoulder's whole. I don't know if that's where we're at with Reuben Foster. So I will change my analysis to say this. Shoulder's not an issue. It's an A+. If the shoulder is an issue, anywhere from C to F or even incomplete, depending on what we get from him. So, boy, did I backtrack from that. Just
it's okay. Pretty sad story about a rotator cuff. When I was 10 years old, I punched my grandmother lightly in her shoulder, and actually she had to get rotator cuff surgery, and then she died. But she died 23 years later, unrelated. But still, I mean, you know.
I won't lie. I was like, oh.
I'm a little bit of a dark guy here. I thought that was pretty funny.
I was going to say, holy cow.
No.
Well, it was nice if you said that when she was drafted in the first round, her career never took off because you punched her in the shoulder.
So here's the good question to ask. When we're looking at night 2, and we're doing the second and third round here, let's do 2 things before we wrap it up. We've actually somehow managed to keep this at a reasonable time, all things considered.
Hey, we're not done yet.
Yeah. So, who do you see being the biggest steal left in this draft?
If we're going to talk about where this guy was slated to go, a couple guys, actually. Cornerback, and I have my notes here, so... cornerback Kevin King. I actually like King. I saw first-round grades on him. Forrest Lamp, the guard. I think somebody will love Lamp, and I think he could actually play center as well.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, 2 other guys. Buda Baker. I do like him. I kind of hope that the Steelers were looking at that. Could be their second round. I don't think he's going to last there. And Dalvin Cook, who seems to be falling. And I wonder if Dalvin Cook could continue to fall.
Yeah, a lot of the names that you would think, a lot of the people, doing day 2 mock drafts do not have Dalvin Cook going to the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, I actually have seen Joe Mixon going to the Packers.
Oh, yeah, I'm actually wearing my Beats by Joe Mixon earphones here.
Wow.
Yeah, this is interesting. Cam Robinson, offensive tackle, Alabama. Definitely some concern about his overall technique. Can you learn that at this age? I don't know. But still a highly talented guy who can definitely round out an offensive line. Curtis Samuels. Wasn't shocked that he didn't go in the first round, but he's definitely someone who has a ton of upside. I think you will see him go earlier in this round, but I think you pretty much touched on all of them, except for DeShone Kizer. He's probably the only other guy that I'm really looking at. Maybe, I guess, Quincy Wilson too, Chidobe Awuzie. There's a couple of guys, but a lot of these guys were already fringe picks. So if they go 36, you're not like, oh man, Chidobe Awuzie, what a deal that is at 36. Like, you're like, all right, he was a fringe first-round guy, but he was mostly like a first, early second, that's where he fell type situation.
Just real quick on Kizer. I've seen him mock to the Steelers. Actually, I saw him mock to the Steelers in round 1.
Yeah.
I really hope that doesn't happen. Obviously, I'm a homer, but Landry Jones isn't as bad as everybody says. He's not great by far, but he's managing the game. So the Steelers defense needs help. So just for any Steelers fans watching this, I will get my homer out of the way. No Kizer. You know Kizer better than I do. But Ben, I don't think retirement talk. Yeah. But I think Ben's got at least another 2 to 3 years, if not maybe 5 at most.
If they come close again and can't get it done this year, I think he's going to keep coming back as long as they're close and he's not the reason why they're not getting there.
True.
So, what is your hot take in round 2? Like, let's I don't want to sit here and do a whole round 2 mock draft or anything, or round 3, but what are your what's a hot take from you on this one?
My hot take on this is I'll go with predictions. 1, I think the Browns are going to continue to be smart. Weird to say. I think the Browns are going to continue to be smart, and I think Dalvin Cook may fall further than anybody planned. Now, of course, I'm sure with that he'll be taken at 33 to the Packers, and I look like a boo. But maybe I'll just start reporting random stuff as other people do on Twitter. So also, this just in, the Browns have traded for 1992 Joe Montana.
Oh, right. Well, I don't think that's the best year to get, but I don't remember
Well,
Joe Montana in 1992, for being honest.
Well, 92, I think, was his last year with San Francisco, so
Okay.
still good.
Yeah, I can see any number of things happening. I think we will still continue to see teams unnecessarily move around for players they could have gotten at the original spot that they were at. I'm just looking through the list of guys here. I think Malik McDowell is going to go early in the second round. I wouldn't be shocked. I've seen a lot of Kaiser to Green Bay talk. Not really sure what that's all about. I think Cook is going to slide to the mid-40s. Something's off there. Like, I think this is going to be a situation where he gets taken and somebody comes out with something and says, oh, yeah, this is the reason why we were just whatever. And that's, I mean, it's so hard to have a hot take. Like, I mean, I could start to tell you guys that I really like that I think are going to get underdrafted that I think can be, like, better day one players than a lot of players that are going to get taken ahead of them. I really feel that way about Carlos Henderson. There's a shot that we hear his name called tonight, but it's really tough to say. Like, his comps, in my opinion, are a combination of Odell Beckham and Jerry Rice, which I'm sure to a lot of people sounds absolutely ridiculous because you're basically just taking two of the best players and saying this kid who's not a first-round pick. But Carlos Henderson, the best guys in the NCAA in terms of their, like, elusive abilities were, like, breaking tackles on something like 15% of their plays. That's what, like, the second highest guy had an elusive percentage of, like, 20%. Carlos Henderson's was 47.
Jeez.
47% of the time he touched the ball, he ran away from someone who could have got him.
That's a pretty shifty human being.
The way that he angles, I always like. There was a catch Odell Beckham made last year when he had 4 guys approaching him. And the way, the angle he ran at, like, it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen, because you see all these guys coming at him, but the angle he was running at, you're like, oh my god, none of these guys are going to be able to get him. And that's exactly what Carlos Henderson does. When he gets his hand on the ball, he just somehow knows what direction he has to go, and he's able to do it. So his deal is definitely going to be situational. It's going to be very important for him to land on a team with a good quarterback and he's not a number one receiver, but he's a guy who could have, like, Wes Welker-like production, because if he has a good big receiver around him, he's going to be able to move all over that field and do a bunch of different things.
Well, that's definitely the name to look for then tonight.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts about the second and third round before we head out here?
No clothing thoughts. I am wearing clothes, by the way, and my terrible towels. No clothing or closing thoughts. English is my second language. Pittsburghese is my first, and that.
Well, that makes sense. I love the fact that they're talking all this Philly dialect there. You've heard the word Johns. Have you heard that come up? That's just so funny to me, because I've heard people in even Youngstown use that for so long. It's just hilarious to me. All right, that'll wrap it up. I hope everybody is excited for round 2. Probably not likely it will be as exciting as round 1, but should still be fun, because we're dealing with a lot of guys I think that still have a ton of upside potential for fantasy purposes. So that'll wrap it up. BC?
At OneSF Podcast on Twitter and Facebook, the new Instagram, BC_Steele. Hey, Nick, how do you spell my last name?
Steele.
Boom! Don't forget that E on the end. And as always, I get to do it in video now. Reprise the theme song and roll the credits.